In a fast-paced world where every moment is precious and time slips away before we know it, have you ever pondered whether your sleep could be more than just a period of rest? Can you envision sharpening your mind while you slumber, transforming each night into an opportunity for personal growth, learning and achieving your loftiest aspirations? If you're eager to unlock the extraordinary potential within yourself, I invite you to explore the pages of this life-changing audiobook. Get ready to be enraptured by the insightful teachings of Orison Swett Marden, as he leads you on a journey to awaken your latent abilities while you peacefully drift into sleep. Wouldn't it be a remarkable privilege to have a dedicated secretary solely focused on fulfilling your desires, no matter how delicate and capable of implementing each of your suggestions? If such a secretary existed and you knew their success depended entirely on your unwavering belief in their abilities, wouldn't you take great care to banish any doubts about their capability to fulfill your desires or suggestions? Now, imagine replacing this personal secretary with your subconscious, the part of you that operates beyond the reaches of consciousness. Consider that this self mirrors the secretary described earlier, capable of actualizing your desires, pursuing your intentions, and realizing your ambitions to the extent that you believe in its powers. Can you fathom the potential of this inner secretary, who is closer to you than your own breath, faithfully accompanying you throughout your life to fulfill your every whim, manifest your wishes, and guide you towards your goals? Each bit of assistance, stimulation, and support you offer to this other self will magnify the grandeur and brilliance of your destiny. Conversely, every negative thought or emotion, every trace of selfishness, greed, or jealousy, every inkling of doubt or fear, every discouraging or destructive notion you entertain will corrode and weaken your inner secretary in precise proportion to its intensity and persistence. Ultimately, whether this secretary becomes your staunchest ally, a celestial companion, or your staunchest adversary, your direst foe, hinges entirely on you. No matter the labels we assign, subconscious and conscious, subjective mind and objective mind, we all acknowledge the perpetual interplay of two forces within us, one that commands and one that obeys. We understand that the subjective mind does not act autonomously, but rather receives directives from the objective mind, which houses the force of will. Experience teaches us that the subjective mind, or the subconscious, referred to as a personal secretary in this context, is a dutiful servant, obediently fulfilling our desires and meticulously recording every thought, word, and action, as well as our observations of the external world. Consider a fascinating example to illustrate this point. A young German maid fell ill with a fever and, in her delirium, effortlessly recited lengthy passages from renowned authors in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew. Scholars, baffled by this display from an uneducated girl, were unable to decipher its meaning. However, the mystery was later unraveled. It transpired that she had previously lived in the household of a pastor, where she had regularly listened to him recite classics aloud. Attentively absorbing these recitations, her subconscious mind faithfully stored every word, allowing her to reproduce them effortlessly when her conscious mind was at rest. Numerous examples could be provided to illustrate that our subconscious mind serves as the storehouse for all our experiences, thoughts, and perceptions. Every sight, sound, and encounter is meticulously logged within our brain by our subconscious mind. Given this remarkable capacity, why not harness it to aid us even while we sleep, just as it does when we are awake? Have you ever pondered the potential for spiritual and mental growth during sleep? Consider that while the body undergoes natural repair and regeneration, the mind could also be engaged in profound development and expansion. Mr. Emmanuel, a renowned Swedish philosopher, staunchly believed in the activity of the subconscious mind during sleep, asserting that his spiritual insight heightened during the unconscious hours of the night. The Bible offers numerous instances of how the subconscious mind, or the inner self, operates during sleep, receiving warnings, assigning tasks, envisioning plans, engaging in dialogues, and providing guidance. Each suggestion penetrates the soul during sleep and manifests in waking hours. Theosophists propose that during sleep, the soul or spirit acts independently of the body, undertaking tasks assigned by the Creator. In reality, few recognize the vast amount of work that automatically unfolds in the body, guided by the subconscious mind. If the entire brain and nervous system were to slumber at night, all bodily functions would cease, leading inevitably to death. Yet one of nature's profound mysteries lies in the ability to keep certain mental faculties and bodily processes active, while the majority rest during sleep, facilitating repair and regeneration of every cell and tissue. It remains a profound mystery of natural processes to submerge a part of the brain and nervous system, along with most mental faculties active during the day, under the gentle embrace of sleep. While repairing and regenerating every cell and tissue, certain bodily processes and even some mental and creative faculties remain awake and alert, tirelessly at work, while the sleeper remains in a state of unconsciousness. Many of us have likely encountered the experience of drifting off to sleep at night, feeling disheartened because we hadn't managed to crack a vexing problem to our satisfaction. It might have been a math puzzle from our school days, or a more intricate issue from our professional or personal life. Then, miraculously, the next morning arrives, and without any conscious effort on our part, the problem is resolved. Its intricacies unravel, and what had seemed insurmountable the day before becomes crystal clear upon awakening. Our conscious, rational self hadn't ventured into the mysterious depths where this transformation occurred. How it happened remains a mystery. All we know is that somehow, while we slept, the solution emerged, unbeknownst to us. Many of our most significant inventions and discoveries have sprung forth from the workings of the subconscious mind during sleep. Countless inventors, who had drifted off to sleep with minds muddled, discouraged, and defeated by the inability to bridge the gap between theory and practical application, awoke to find their problems magically solved. Mathematicians and astronomers have achieved remarkable breakthroughs during slumber, finding answers to questions that had confounded them during waking hours. Writers, poets, painters, musicians, creatives of all stripes have received inspiration for their work while their bodies lay at rest. While some may attempt to explain these phenomena solely through physical processes, attributing them to the brain's renewal and rejuvenation during sleep, there seems to be something deeper at play. We've all had experiences that hint at a greater principle, an intelligent force beyond mere physicality, constantly at work in our lives, a force that aids us in resolving our quandaries in ways that elude us in waking moments. One of the most intriguing anecdotes of this nature is found in the biography of the eminent scientist Professor Louis Agassiz, penned by his widow. Professor Agassiz had labored for 2 weeks attempting to decipher an obscure engraving of a fossil fish preserved on a stone slab. Exhausted and perplexed, he eventually abandoned his efforts, striving to banish the problem from his mind. Then one night, he awoke with a conviction that during his slumber, he had visualized the fish with all its missing features perfectly restored. Yet, as he endeavored to retain and fix the image, it dissipated. Come morning, he rose early, hoping that a fresh look at the engraving might provide a clue to his vision. However, to his dismay, the blurry record remained as enigmatic as ever. Undeterred, he anticipated a recurrence of the experience on the following night, placing a pencil and paper by his bedside before drifting off to sleep. True to his hopes, the fish materialized once more in his dream, initially in a hazy manner, but gradually crystallizing with such clarity that he harbored no doubt about its anatomical details. In a state between sleep and wakefulness, he swiftly traced these features onto the sheet of paper. Upon awakening, he was astonished to find in his nocturnal sketch details he deemed impossible to discern in the fossil itself. Hastening to the garden, guided by his drawing, he successfully chiseled the stone surface to unveil the concealed parts of the fish. Upon complete exposure, it precisely matched his dream and drawing, facilitating its classification with ease. We are all familiar with extraordinary feats accomplished by somnambulists. They navigate their surroundings, dressing, opening and closing doors, venturing into perilous locales where they would never dare to tread while awake. Many confidently tread on the outer edges of rooftops, riverbanks or cliff edges where a misstep could prove fatal. They speak, write and act with apparent awareness of their actions, engaging in rational conversations even while asleep. In this respect, the state of the somnambulist resembles that of a person in a hypnotic trance, amenable to external influence while wholly unconscious. Surgical procedures have been performed on hypnotized individuals without anesthesia, suggesting the feasibility of similar actions during deep sleep. The subjective mind proves highly receptive to suggestion when the objective mind is conscious, devoid of resistance stemming from biases or external influences. The potential for treating ailments during sleep, cultivating new habits, effecting mental transformations, bolstering deficient faculties, eradicating peculiarities and idiosyncrasies, as well as neutralizing harmful hereditary tendencies, increasing capacity and molding disposition and intellect during sleep, are only just beginning to be explored. The subjective mind's dominion over the body is vividly exemplified by the ability to manipulate waking thoughts in a hypnotized individual. Through willpower, blood circulation can be directed to any bodily region. A hypnotist can induce blushing or pallor, evoke expressions of intense anger, or induce anesthesia in specific body parts, enabling painless procedures. They can implant the belief that harmless substances are toxic or intoxicating, eliciting corresponding physiological responses. Impressions upon the subjective mind persist indefinitely, as evidenced by its ability to execute commands and retain indelible impressions. How often do we lament, "I cannot recall a familiar name," or the details of a significant event or experience, only for forgotten details to resurface when least expected, long after our attempts to recollect them? Despite our nightly endeavors to focus on specific memories, only to find them eluding us, our brain faithfully records each day's experiences, emotions, and mental states, storing them in the subconscious, where they remain accessible. While these memories may not readily respond to conscious recall, they persist with their original vividness, capable of resurfacing unexpectedly. I recall the case of a prominent banker who had misplaced a vital key, the sole access to the bank vault, insisting it had been stolen rather than misplaced. Despite suspicions falling on employees, a seasoned detective hired by the bank concluded that none save the banker himself possessed any knowledge of the key's whereabouts. Every detective inevitably possesses some degree of psychological insight, and this particular detective, steadfast in his convictions, proposed a straightforward plan to retrieve the lost key. Advising the banker to cease suspecting his employees and worrying about potential theft, he encouraged him to calm his anxious mind and retire to bed with the belief that he himself had stowed away the key and would rediscover it in the morning. With this suggestion, the detective asserted, "I believe the mystery will be solved." The banker, complying as best he could, followed the detective's counsel. Upon awakening the next day, he felt an intuitive pull toward a concealed location, where, to his astonishment, the key awaited him. Although he had not consciously placed the key there upon its discovery, a faint recollection surfaced of having visited that spot before. It appeared that the banker's conscious mind had been occupied with other matters when he initially hid the key, leaving only his subconscious aware of his actions. Thus, when he initially misplaced the key, his fears, worries, anxiety, suspicions, and general state of restlessness had obstructed his subjective mind from divulging the secret. However, once his mind settled and realigned with his subjective intelligence, the information was conveyed. Dr. Jack Duck, a respected British authority on the subject, contends that memory, liberated from distractions, can sometimes be so vivid during sleep that it allows the sleeper to recall events from years ago that had been entirely forgotten. Therefore, if the subconscious mind can indeed perform tangible tasks, rendering genuine assistance, why not leverage it, particularly during sleep? Why not harness this immense creative force to fortify our faculties and potentials, effectively extending our time and lifespan? Imagine the possibilities if we could maintain these creative functions in a splendid state throughout our lives, continuing to solve our problems, uncover our capabilities, and further our plans while we sleep. There is ample evidence to suggest that they indeed undertake meaningful constructive endeavors. The symbiosis of thought and sleep is a concept difficult to dispute. During debates, logically sound arguments are presented. Likewise, after engaging in spirited discussions, we may dream of conducting a series of experiments related to the topic, the details of which remain vivid upon waking. These dreams, retaining their intellectual clarity, serve as a testament to the excellent condition of our mental faculties. It is well established that certain regions of the brain remain active during sleep, while others succumb to the anesthesia of slumber. Yet we are only just beginning to comprehend the tremendous potential of this creative aspect of the brain during sleep in our cognitive development. It is well known that most of a child's growth, their skeleton, muscles, nerves, and the 12 different types of tissues in their body occur during sleep, which differs from other hours of the day. Furthermore, it is understandable that our minds also grow during the night and develop according to the ideals, thoughts, and emotions with which we nourish them before resting. All analogies show that the mind is always awake. It states that the mind during sleep is not in a special state of mind, but continues and develops exactly as during waking hours. In fact, we never wake up as we were when we fell asleep. We are better or worse because we changed while we slept. While our senses are enveloped in sleep, the subconscious mind is busy working, building, or destroying. I firmly believe that with intelligent direction and a system of this creative faculty of the brain, we can make it create for us according to our desires. However, most people not adequately preparing their minds before sleeping not only do not intelligently use this wonderful creative agency, but destroy any possibility of obtaining beneficial results from its action. It is just as necessary to prepare the mind for sleep as it is to prepare the body. Further on, we propose some suggestions on this subject. Mental preparation for sleep is not very different from preparing the body. A little further on, we will propose some suggestions on this subject. Mental preparation for sleep is not very different from preparing the body. Not long ago, I heard a young woman comment that it was simply impossible for a woman to be charming or pleasant just after waking up in the morning. Reverend Dr. Gusnal stated that a man should stand by a woman who wakes up angry. How we feel upon waking up in the morning depends on how we felt or thought before falling asleep. If we go to bed brooding over resentment towards a neighbor or resolving to settle scores with someone who has hurt us, unknowingly, if in our hearts there is hatred or jealousy, if we envy others' success, or if we go to bed nurturing these feelings, then we wake up in a depressed and tired state, feeling bitter, pessimistic, irritable, unhappy, closer to a demon than a human being, the destroyer. It has worked all night, causing disturbances in delicate brain and nerve cells, furiously destroying what benevolent nature had strived to build. But when we go to bed with pleasant, kind, and affectionate thoughts, we wake up refreshed with a happy and contented frame of mind. Our active faculties have spent hours building, performing sweet works for us during the night. Few people think of preparing their minds for sleep, but this is even more necessary than preparing the body. Most of us strive to order the latter. We undress, take a warm bath, massage our faces with some refreshing balm, cold cream, or oil, make sure our room is well ventilated, and our bed is clean and comfortable. But to the question of preparing our mind, we do not even give the slightest importance. Instead of allowing our subconscious mental processes to build for us during the night, we allow them to destroy much of what we have built during the day. Many of us grow old, deteriorate, and wither away during the night, when it should be the opposite, because nature itself has established that the night is the time for construction, for the renewal of life. If we prepared the mind for sleep with the same intelligence and care that we prepare the body, if we took a purifying mental bath, erasing the memory board of all the dark and disharmonious images, all the concerns and fears that have plagued and confused us during the day, then instead of having a nightmarish panorama that passes and replays before us all night, stealing the necessary rest from us and neutralizing our forces of reconstitution and recovery, what a great difference it would make in our successes, in our lives. I know men whose lives have been revolutionized by adopting the practice of settling into a harmonious state, in harmony with the infinite when they went to bed. Previously, they used to retire angry, tired, discouraged by anticipated adversities, preoccupied with all sorts of problems. They discussed their misfortunes at night with their wives, then pondered the unhappy conditions of their business. their mistakes, and the possible negative consequences that could result from them. It is evident that their minds were in an altered state when they fell asleep, and as expected, the melancholic, dark, and ugly images of the misfortunes they had experienced became vividly exaggerated in the quiet of the night. They embedded themselves deeper and deeper into their brain and made their ominous appearance, making true rest and renewal completely impossible. When they changed their habits, changed their thoughts, and retired with a peaceful state of mind, intending to go to sleep instead of tossing and turning thinking about their problems, their issues immediately began to improve. They were stronger, fresher, more vigorous, smarter, and more capable of facing difficulties, planning for them, and implementing them, compared to when they exhausted their physical and mental resources, depriving themselves of their best friend, nature's restorer, sleep. Many people tell me they can't stop thinking when they go to bed. Their brain is so active, planning the work of the next day, that they can't stop mental processes for hours. Of course, you can't stop thinking the first night you start forming the new habit. When you have practiced the old habit of thinking at night for several years, perhaps since you can remember, you have gone to bed every night with worries, concerns, thinking and planning ahead for the days, weeks, months to come. Planning ahead, maybe even for the next year. But if you persevere and make it an unshakable rule, allowing neither worries nor fears, nor business problems nor dissensions of any kind to enter your room, you will succeed in reaching your goal. Think of your room as the only sacred place for rest, where the things that torment, harass, and disturb you during the day will not find entry. Place this inscription above the door or in a visible place where it can be seen. This is my sanctuary, the place of peace and supreme power in my life, from which discord must be excluded. When you undress and lie down, tell yourself, I have done all I could during the day. Now I will stop thinking, worrying, and planning. I will sleep well and peacefully to prepare for tomorrow's work. Empty your mind, not only of all anxious and worrying thoughts about business, but also of any ill will or hatred towards others. Decide that you will entertain no unpleasant, bitter, or antipathetic thought towards any human being, that you will erase from the tablet of your memory anything you have had against anyone, that you will forget everything that has been unpleasant in the past and start with a clean slate. Imagine that the words harmony, peace, love, and goodwill towards every living creature are printed in letters of light on all the walls of your room. Repeat them over and over again until that other self, that personal secretary, just below the threshold of your consciousness, is saturated with the ideas they convey. After a while, let yourself slip into sleep with a serene and stable mind, a mind filled with happy, joyful, and creative thoughts. Naturally, until the new habit is established, thoughts will creep in, despite yourself. Even if you don't need to feed them, you must not allow yourself to continue thinking about business or any other subject of discord after retiring, just as you would not allow a madman to stab you without making any effort to defend yourself. You can only do this if you persist in the new and better way to fall asleep every night, like a tired child, and wake up the next morning as fresh and cheerful. You and your subconscious, after a while, will carry out your orders without any conscious effort on your part. This insomniac subconscious self is actually one of man's most effective agents to help him achieve whatever he desires. Insomnia, for example, which is the curse of so many Americans, can be completely overcome with its help. If you are suffering from insomnia and go to bed every night firmly believing that you will sleep, you are largely a victim of your belief. The conviction in your subconscious mind that there is a problem with your ability to sleep is largely responsible for the persistence of your problem. We know from experience that we can convince ourselves of almost anything by stating it long enough and with a constant frequency of repetition. After a while, the conviction is established in our mind that the thing is true. We can establish the habit of sleep with the same ease as any other habit. It is perfectly possible to reacquire the power to sleep normally through affirmation and constant repetition in heart-to-heart conversations with ourselves. Your subconscious, that part of your nature that supervises involuntary or automatic functions during sleep, as well as when you are awake, will be there to help you, for example, to walk and perform other activities that do not require. The abolition of mind or special will, it can be induced to obey its orders, or rather its suggestions, to overcome insomnia. Tell this inner being, you know there is no reason why you shouldn't sleep. There is no defect in your physical or mental constitution that keeps you awake. You should sleep soundly for many hours every night, and there is no reason why you shouldn't. So, you will do it tonight. Repeat similar affirmations during the day. Tell yourself, this insomnia is only a bad habit. If you were physically or mentally ill, if you had serious defects in your nervous system that gave you an excuse for insomnia, it would be another matter. But you have none of that. You are simply a slave to an absurd obsession, and you will be done with it. Start now. You will sleep better tonight, tomorrow night, and the next. You will put an end to this imaginary monster you have built in your mind that doesn't exist in reality. Nothing is holding you awake except your conviction and fear of not being able to sleep. Prepare your mind for sleep as suggested. Empty it of all worry, fear, jealousy, lack of charity, of anything disturbing, irritating, or exciting. Replace all this with thoughts of joy, good humor, and things that help and inspire you. Behave with the conviction that you will fall asleep easily and naturally. Relax every muscle and tell yourself calmly and drowsily, I am so sleepy, so much sleep, too much. The subconscious will listen to you and quickly put your suggestion into practice automatically. Needless to say, if insomnia is the result of bad habits or irregular habits, the victim must first change their habits before hoping for any relief. Man is made of habits. We perform most of the functions of our life with more or less regularity, so they become practically automatic. Regularity, system, and order are indispensable for our health, success, and happiness. This is particularly true when it comes to sleep. We must maintain regular schedules and be systematic in our habits. Our sleep can be affected if you play as hard as you work. You refresh and revitalize yourself with enjoyable entertainment when you have finished working. Then at a regular hour each night, prepare your mind for sleep, just as you would prepare your body. Give yourself a mental shower and dress with beautiful thoughts. If you do this, in a short time, you will establish the habit of deep, peaceful, and restorative sleep. Whether you do it or not, get used to making a call to your greater inner self before retiring. Leave the message of elevation, expansion, and amplification of yourself, of what you desire and want to achieve, but don't know how. Record this call, this request for something higher and nobler in your subconscious, making it available to you. It will work like yeast overnight, and after a while, all the constructive forces within you will come together to promote your goal, to help you realize your vision. Any sleep period can become a wonderful period of growth for both mind and body. It is a time when you can draw your desires, a favorable time to nourish your vision. Instead of turning your subconscious into an enemy, avoid giving it destructive, explosive thoughts that will destroy much of what you have accomplished throughout the day. Make it your friend by giving it strong, creative, and helpful thoughts with which it can continue to create and build for you overnight. During sleep, there are wonderful opportunities to build health, character, success, and happiness. Every thought planted in the subconscious mind before falling asleep is a seed that will germinate overnight while we are unconscious and eventually yield a harvest of its kind, imprinting our desires, envisioning our ideals in the most vivid way possible, what we must become and what we desire to achieve. It will be amazing to see how quickly this wonderful force in the subjective self will begin to shape the pattern and build the model given to it. In this way, we can correct habits that harm our self-esteem, that humiliate us, that compromise our usefulness and efficiency, and that may undermine our lives. We can rid ourselves of faults and imperfections. We can strengthen our weak faculties and overcome defective tendencies that will not correct during the day. As it is now clear, the subconscious mind can build or destroy, can make us happy or unhappy depending on the pattern we give it before sleeping. If it can solve the problems of the inventor, the discoverer, the troubled businessman, why don't we use it more? Why don't we harness this formidable mental, power to build life, character, success, and happiness instead of destroying them. One of the reasons is that we are just beginning to discover that we can control this secondary self or intelligence that governs all bodily functions without the immediate orders of the objective self. We catch a glimpse of what it can do through experiences with hypnotized subjects when the objective mind, the mind that draws most of its information through the five senses, shuts off and the other, which is the subjective mind, takes control. We discover that it is relatively easy to bring about wonderful changes in mood and to correct bad habits, mental and moral defects through suggestion. There is no doubt that with regard to the subconscious mind, we are in a similar condition when we sleep as when we are in a hypnotic trance, and experiences have shown that wonderful results are possible, especially in the case of children. By speaking to them while they sleep, by giving them advice and suggestions that are for their good, parents should teach their children to prepare their minds for sleep, so that the subconscious self can create and produce something beautiful instead of dark and discordant images of fear that so often terrify little ones before falling asleep, and when they wake up in the dark hours of the night. How often have we noticed the worried and fearful expression on a sleeping child's face who has been put to bed with thoughts of anger or fear in their mind after a severe scolding or perhaps punishment? A child should never be scolded or frightened nor teased, especially just before bedtime. They should be encouraged to fall asleep in their sweetest and happiest frame of mind, in the spirit of love. Then their sleeping face will reflect the spirit of love, and the child will wake up with the same spirit, as if they had spoken with angels during their sleep. Children are particularly sensitive to the influence of our thoughts, our suggestions during sleep. Their character can be largely molded, their skills developed, their faults eradicated, and their weaknesses strengthened during sleep. In a sense, suggestions made in this state have more effect than those made while they are awake. Because while the objective mind tends to scatter and not reproduce what is presented to it, the subjective mind gradually absorbs and reflects each suggestion. Many mothers have found this to be true, especially in correcting bad habits that seemed almost impossible to address when children were awake. If you want your child to be beautiful in character, temperament, person, think beautiful thoughts in their mind while they sleep. Speak to them about beautiful things during their sleep. I believe there will come a time when much of a child's training will take place during sleep. Their aesthetic faculties, love for music, art, or all noble and beautiful things, special talents and latent possibilities of all kinds will develop through suggestion. The wonderful internal creative forces hold the great secret of life, and blessed is he who discovers it. Doubly blessed is he who finds it early in life. According to Orison, we truly do not count a man's years until he has nothing left to count. The ability to mentally retain the image of youth in all its glory, vivacity, and splendor has a powerful effect in slowing the aging process. Old age begins in the heart. When the heart cools, the skin ages, and the signs of age imprint on the body. The mind weakens, ideals fade, and the juices of life freeze. There are many people who expect old age to be a phase where, as a contemporary author puts it, you feel that no one loves you, that those you have supported and raised have long since gone their own way, and that the life of the world of thought moves so quickly that you find yourself in a quiet current clumsily and blindly seeking the fullness of water, always gently but inexorably pushing. There is such a type of old age, but not for those who approach life correctly. Such a pathetic and tragic outcome is not for those who love and are loved, for they keep their hearts open to the joys and sorrows of life. They maintain a compassionate interest in their fellow beings, in the progress and elevation of the world. They keep their faculties sharpened by use, and their minds constantly expanding, broadening, and growing in love and service to humanity. A dark and useless old age is reserved only for those who have not learned to live. Growth in knowledge and wisdom should be the only sign of our additional years. Dr. Paul Bousquet, one of the leading authorities on aging, believes that it is possible to prolong life with maximum vigor and freshness until the end of its normal cycle, when the individual will gratefully welcome what will be a perfectly happy release. He asserts that at this stage, the instinct of death will take precedence over the instinct of life. As the body mechanism approaches the natural conclusion of normal exhaustion, he believes that men should live and maintain their usefulness for at least 120 years. The author of The Philosophy of Longevity tells us that man can live up to 200 years. Speaking in philosophical terms, the human body possesses unmatched durability. None of the machines invented by man could withstand continuous strains for even a year as ours does, and yet it continues to perform its functions. Yet, what terrifies us is the premature death of faculties, the decline of power, opportunity, and vigor of the body long before the end of life on Earth. It unsettles us, relinquishing much of life that has the potential for work, action, and happiness. This horror of aging is accentuated because life is constantly becoming more interesting. There has never been a time when it seemed so precious and full of possibilities, when there was so much to live for as in this glorious present. There has never been a time when it seemed so difficult to step out of the race of life. We stand on the threshold of a new and wonderful era, and all humanity awaits. Never before has the idea of aging, represented by decline and forced inactivity, been so repugnant. But why should anyone wait for such a long period? It is precisely this waiting, anticipating, and welcoming the arrival of old age that makes us old, senile, and useless. The creative forces within us are based on our suggestions, our thought patterns, and if we continually introduce thoughts of old age and images of decline into our consciousness, these ideas and images will reproduce in the body. A few years ago, a young man died at an advanced age in a New York hospital. After an autopsy, surgeons declared that although the man was only 23 years old, the inside seemed to be 80. If you reach an age that you accept as the starting point of physical deterioration, your body will solidify with your belief. Your way of walking, your overall appearance, and even your actions will adapt to your mental attitude. Recently, I was talking to a remarkable 60-year-old man about the idea of aging. The idea of the inevitability of the aging process frightened him, no matter how much effort he could put into avoiding or delaying decrepitude, since old age would come, a period of diminishing returns. And even if he could fight it, he would still be declining, with life inexorably moving toward decline, closer and closer to the moment when he would be useless. The conviction that every moment, every hour, every day is always getting closer to that hole in the ground from which no celestial or earthly power could help us escape would always be present in his mind, this man added. Furthermore, this progressive and ever-active retreat is monstrous. This inevitable aging that stares me straight in the eyes, steals my happiness, paralyzes my efforts, and discourages my ambition. So, ask yourself, why do you insist on things that terrify you? Why do you have these thoughts of aging? Why do you visualize decline, numbness, and deterioration of your mental faculties if you are so afraid of decline, memory loss, blurry vision, unsteady gait, and overall decline that you believe accompanies old age? Why don't you distance yourself from these terrifying thoughts? Why don't you push them away from your mind instead of insisting on them? Don't you know that what you focus on, what you fear, the images that terrify you so much, create the same conditions from which you would give anything to escape? If you really want to stay in the aging process, you must change your thoughts, erase from your mind everything related to age, and visualize conditions of youth. Tell yourself, God is my life, I cannot age. In spirit, and that is the only aging to fear. As long as my spirit is young, and I feel young in my life, I really cannot age. The great problem of those who age is that they distance themselves from the things that would keep them young. Most people after 50 begin to ridicule children, and young people in general feel that it is not their age to act as they did when they were younger, and plunge day by day more and more into the manners and habits of old age. We build in our lives the image patterns we have in our minds. It's a mental law. When you reach the point where most people show signs of their age, you imagine you should do the same. You start thinking that you've probably done your best work and that your faculties should decline from now on. You imagine your faculties diminishing, not being as sharp as before, not being able to endure as much. You imagine you should start letting go a bit, doing less exercise, working less, and taking life more calmly. The moment you allow yourself to think that your faculties are beginning to decline, they will, and your appearance and the conditions of your body will follow your convictions. If you entertain the idea that your ambition is waning, that your faculties are deteriorating, you will be convinced that the young surpass you, and you will willingly start taking a back seat, metaphorically, behind the young. Once this is done, you will be condemned to be pushed further and further back. You will be judged by your own assessment, having made a confession of age, acknowledging in thoughts and actions that, when it comes to work and productive output, you are no longer equal to the young. They will naturally be preferred over you. If prematurely aged persons could analyze the influences that robbed them of the birthright to youth, they would discover that most of them are a false belief that they must age more or less at that time. Any concern is useless. Anxiety often arises from vanity, jealousy, and indulgence in passions such as excessive temper, revenge, and any kind of unhealthy thought. If we could eliminate these influences from our lives, we would take a big step towards youthfulness. If we could erase all the scars and wrinkles, all the effects of our thoughts, emotions, moods, and passions that age, then many of us would be so transformed and rejuvenated that our friends would barely recognize us. Aging thoughts, moods, and passions make most of us old as soon as we reach midlife. The laws of renewal and rejuvenation are always operational within us, and they will be effective if we do not neutralize them with erroneous thoughts. The chemical changes caused in the blood and other secretions by worry, fear, the effect of explosive passions, or any depressive mental disorder are what will set in motion the aging processes. What we firmly establish in our lives, we pass on to our children, and this belief acquires cumulative strength over the centuries. All children in Christian countries are born with the racial belief that 60 or 70 years represent some sort of limit of human life. This has crystallized into a racial belief. Thus, we start preparing for the end well before the appointed time. As long as we maintain this belief, we cannot rid our minds of the suggestion that when we pass the halfway mark, our faculties begin to decline. The very idea of having reached our limit of growth that we must abandon all hope of. Further progress tends to impress more deeply the image and conviction of old age in our minds. And of course, the creative processes can only reproduce the pattern given to them. Some men cross the summit line from which they believe they must descend a quarter of a century before us, for we cross this demarcation mentally earlier. We cross it when we are convinced we have passed the peak of our productive power and have entered the period of diminishing returns. Many people have what they like to call a premonition that they will not live beyond a certain age, and this becomes a goal for their entire life. They start preparing for the end. Their belief that they will die at a specific time largely establishes the limitation of their years. Not long ago, at a reception, I met a very learned and intelligent man who told me he was perfectly sure he could not grow old. He accurately quoted his belief in the analogy that runs through all nature, showing that plants, animals, and all life forms that mature early die early, and as he was practically an adult at 15, he was convinced he should die relatively young. He said he was like a poplar compared to an oak. One matures and dies early, the other matures late and is very long-lived. This man is so under the sway of his belief that he must die young that he does not strive for longevity, does not usually take care of his health or the necessary precautions in times of danger. He argues, "What's the point of trying to fight against the laws of nature? I'd better enjoy my life and get the most out of it while I'm alive, trying to make up for an early death." Many individuals start their youth with the belief that they have a hereditary blemish, a predisposition to a disease that will probably shorten their lives. They go through life with this restrictive and limiting thought so deeply rooted in the marrow of their being that they don't even seek to develop to the fullest of their abilities. Our successes depend largely on the plan and expectations we have for our lives. If we make our plan fit only half or a third of the time we should naturally live, we will only achieve a fraction of what we are truly capable of doing. I have a friend who, from childhood, was convinced he would not live long, and if he were to survive a day, he would not go beyond 40, as his parents had died before that age. Consequently, He never planned for a long life of constant growth and increasing power, and the result is that he has not realized half of his actual capabilities. It is infinitely preferable to believe that we will live many years longer than we probably anticipate, rather than sacrifice a few precious years by setting a death date, simply because one of our parents or both died around that age, or because we fear we have inherited a disease, like cancer, that will probably develop fatally at a specific time. Think about the pernicious influence exerted on a child's mind by the constant suggestion that they will probably die very young because their parents or some of their relatives did. Even if they are lucky enough to survive the illnesses and accidents of youth and early maturity, they won't be able to extend much beyond their life limit if they exceed it at a certain point. However, we instill in our children's minds other similar suggestions until they become an integral part of their lives. We celebrate birthdays and mark each recurring anniversary as a special day, establishing in our minds the thought that we are aging throughout our mature life, constantly keeping in mind the image of death, the idea that we must wait for it and prepare for it almost at that time. The truth is that the suggestion of death has caused more destruction and ruined more lives than almost anything else in the history of humanity. It is responsible for most of the fear, which is the greatest curse of the race. A remarkable doctor asserts that if children were rather educated more in the principles of immortality, instead of hearing so often about death, they would retain their youth much longer and could lengthen their lives. I believe that there will come a time when the habit of celebrating birthdays, which emphasizes the fact that we are aging by a year and getting closer to the end, will be eliminated. Then, children will not be reminded so forcibly once every 365 days that each birthday is a milestone in age. We knew that the mind is not influenced by years, that its very essence is youth and immortality. Deep in our souls, we realize that there is a principle of life within us that knows neither age nor death. We will discover that old age is largely a matter of mental attitude, and that we will become what we believe we must be. In reality, average lifespan is constantly increasing as science teaches men how to live to preserve health and youth. Formerly, men and women aged much earlier than today and died very young. We don't think as much about death as at the beginning of this country, when preparing for the afterlife seemed to be the main occupation of our Puritan ancestors. They had very little consideration for this world and did not seek to enjoy life much. They always talked, prayed and sang about life there, while making life here dark and restrictive. They forgot that the religion taught by Christ was a source of great joy. There is no greater enemy of aging processes than always living joyfully. Hope, good humor and joy embody the youthful spirit. If you want to stay young, cultivate that spirit. Have young thoughts, live much in youth, enter into their lives, sports, games or ambitions. Play the role of the young with enthusiasm and fervor. You cannot use a skill until you think and believe you can do it. Your reserve power will remain inactive until your self-confidence calls it into action. If you want to continue being young, act as if you feel young. If you don't want to age, stop thinking and acting as if you are aging. Instead of walking with slumped shoulders and a slow, dragging step, adopt an upright posture and give elasticity to your steps. Don't walk like an old person whose energy is waning, whose youthful flames are dying out. Walk with the elasticity of a young person full of life, spirit, and vigor. The body is not old until the mind consents to it. Stop considering yourself an old person and stop manifesting symptoms of decrepitude. Remember that the impression you leave on others will act upon you. If you let others get the idea that you are aging physically and mentally, you will have much more to overcome in your effort to change their beliefs. When we have the ambition to achieve a specific goal and our heart is focused on it, we strive to obtain it. We mentally connect with it and link it through our thoughts. We establish a connection with the desired goal. In other words, we do our and best to achieve it, and mental effort is a real force that tends to match our dream with its realization. A modern and up-to-date woman is a good example of what I mean. She does not behave like an old person and does not dress like one either. When you have passed the half of life, we no longer see the old lady's hat or dress as was previously the case. Aging women now dress in a youthful manner, so they appear younger than their grandmothers at the same age. They do their best to look young. Men are much more likely than women to neglect their personal appearance as they age. They let their hair grow, let their beard grow, slouch their shoulders, drag their feet when walking, and begin to neglect their dress. They are not as attentive to preserving their youthful appearance as women, who use all sorts of resources to avoid signs of aging and continue to maintain their charm. The habit of aging must be fought, just as we fight any other habit, by reversing the processes by which it forms instead of giving in to age-related convictions and fears. Firmly reject and affirm the opposite when you are suggested that your powers are diminishing, that you can no longer do what you did before. Show the falsehood of that by exercising the faculties you believe are weakening. Yielding is only yielding to age. We tend to find what we seek in this world, and if what we seek as we age are constantly signs of old age, then we will find them. If we are constantly attentive to the symptoms of failing faculties, we will discover many of them. The great danger in this is that we tend to consider our unhappy states of mind as permanent symptoms. In other words, an individual whose mind is focused on their aging processes tends to draw a mistaken conclusion from their temporary states of mind and feelings, thereby ending up confusing them with permanent conditions. Most people showing signs of premature aging suffer from the poison of chronic thinking, that is, the poison of chronic aging. From birth, they have heard about old age, the repetition of the conviction that at a certain age, a person would naturally start to slow down and prepare for the end. So, instead of fighting age by maintaining the thought of eternal youth and vitality, they have kept thoughts of weakness and declining faculties. When they forget something, they say their memory is starting to regress, that their eyesight will soon decline, and they continue to anticipate signs of decline and decrepitude until the visualization of old age is incorporated into the very structure of their bodies. Instead of creating the habit of seeking signs of age, create the habit of seeking signs of youth. You must get used to thinking that your body is robust and flexible, that your brain is strong and active. Never allow yourself to think that you are declining, that your faculties are diminishing, that you are not as sharp as before, and that you cannot think well because your cells are aging. Those who believe they are aging will age, and those who believe they are young will stay young. A good sign of the power of mental influence is the wonderful shape in which many actresses and opera singers maintain their youth because they feel it is imperative. Dozens of other actresses and singers would have pursued any other vocation, undoubtedly appearing at least 10 or 20 years older in appearance than they actually are. There are too many exceptions to the racial belief that human faculties begin to decline at 50, 60, or 70 years old to be influenced by it. We should really do our best work after 50 years old if the brain remains active, fresh, and young, and if brain cells are not damaged by a vicious life, anxiety, selfishness, or life-induced diseases or erroneous thoughts. The mind will constantly increase in vigor and power. Men and women whose faculties are sharp and whose minds are sharp and vigorous at 90 or even 100 years old are proof of this. I know many men between 60 and 80 years old who are physically and mentally robust and vigorous as they were 20 years ago. Recently, I spoke with a businessman who went bankrupt at 40 due to excessive stress, but who now at 80 years old is more prosperous and mentally and physically elastic than many 50-year-old men. This man does not believe in aging because he knows that 10 years ago he didn't have even a bit of cellular material in his body like he does today. His words are as follows: I should mark these new body cells with 80 years, whereas none of them can be a quarter of that age. Many of us do not realize the biological fact that nature itself endows us with the power of perpetual renewal. There is no cell in our body that can age much, because they all renew frequently. Physiologists tell us that tissue cells in some muscles renew in a few months. Some authorities estimate that between 80 and 90% of all cells in the body of an ordinary active person are completely renewed in a few years. However, mental attitude is the most important of all. There is no way to stay young while being convinced that you must manifestly show the characteristics of aging. Aging thoughts are imprinted on the body's new cells, so they soon appear to be 40, 50, 60, or 70 years old. We must maintain the conviction that no cell in the body can be old, because all are constantly renewing. It is impossible for processes that produce sensitivity to take control of the system or bring about very serious changes to the body unless the mind first gives its consent. Age is not so much determined by the years past as by the vitality and flexibility of the cellular protoplasm in our bodies. And nothing ages protoplasm as much as aged thoughts and enemies of serenity, such as anxiety, worries, fear, anger, hatred, revenge, or any discordant emotion. If you keep your protoplasm young by maintaining young ideals, there is no reason why you couldn't live well into the teens of your second cycle. Constantly affirm, "I am young because I am perpetually renewing myself. My life becomes new at every moment, infinite in life. I am new every morning and fresh every evening, for I live, move, and have my being in Him, who is the source of all life." Not only affirm this mentally, but also verbally. Make this image of perpetual renewal and recreation so vivid that you will feel the emotion of rejuvenation throughout your entire system. Some people try to heal physical damage caused by erroneous living and thinking. By applying patches to their bodies from the outside, the beauty salons of our great cities are overrun by desperate women wanting to maintain their youthful appearance without realizing that the elixir of youth lies in their own minds and not in bottles or boxes. There is nothing more terrible than seeing a truly old woman because her heart is no longer young, with her face made up or enameled, dressed like a young girl. A woman like this fools no one but herself. Others can see the old, dry skin beneath the makeup. They can see the wrinkles she tries to hide. She cannot disguise her age with these frivolous pretenses of coloring her cheeks and wearing little girl's clothes. That doesn't make a person younger. It's largely a matter of mental age. If the mind has become hardened, dry, and disinterested, if there is no charm in the personality, then one is old no matter how many years they have. Rich, idle, and selfish women who lead debauched lives, constantly doing things that hasten the onset of old age, eating too much, drinking too much, or spending their lives doing nothing but indulging every luxury whim, are the best clients of cosmetic doctors who try to erase signs of aging by treating the skin and hair, treating the effects rather than seeking to eliminate the cause of aging. This has never been, nor can it ever be, truly successful. You cannot repair age-induced damage from the outside. The cause, which lies in the mind and heart, must be eliminated. When one ceases to be kind and helpful and loses all interest in life, damage to beauty seems inevitable, despite all the cosmetic doctors in the world. I know idle women of wealthy men who do not understand why they age so rapidly in appearance, even though they lead such easy lives without worries or responsibilities. They are bewildered as to why, when they don't need to work, when they have no needs, and when all their necessities are met without any effort on their part, they cannot maintain their youthful appearance for many more years than others. The fact is that these women stagnate, and nothing ages faster than mental and physical imprisonment. Work, a useful occupation of some sort, is the price of all real growth and true human expansion. One who succumbs to laziness continues to pay the price through continual physical, mental, and moral degradation. A ship lying idle in the harbor rots and falls apart much faster than a ship at sea in constant use. All the forces of nature seem to unite to corrode and destroy what is not used. The lazy person, work, love, kindness, sympathy, help, and unselfish interest are the essence of eternal youth. These never grow old. And if you take them as friends, they will act as a leaven in your life, enriching your nature, softening and uplifting your character, and prolonging your youth until the age of 100. We learn that the legendary fountain of youth is within ourselves and manifests in our mentality. Rejuvenation and perpetual renewal are possible through right thinking. We would appear and remain young as we think and feel, for thought and feeling maintain or modify our appearance in perfect accordance with their persistence or variation. It is impossible to appear and remain young if we do not feel young. Young thinking must become a habit in our lives. Those who give God the greatest opportunity in them experience a deeper bond and live better in the company of infinite life. If we knew how to live, move, and be in Him, to be aware of this at every moment, then we would have understood the true meaning of living. We would be satisfied, for we would awaken in His image at the deepest level of every heart that has not forgotten the meaning of its inner vision. In this belief lies the conviction that we are united with an unknown and invisible power, and that somehow we are inseparably bound to infinite consciousness. It is a mental law that thoughts and beliefs can attract only those of their own kind. A thought of hatred is a magnet for hatred, and the longer we maintain it, the more firmly we will contemplate and focus on it in the mind, the greater and more powerful the magnet of hatred will become. In the early days of the European Great War, a Jewish soldier in the front line of a Russian battalion engaged in close combat with an Austrian in the opposing battalion. In their desperate encounter, the Russian Jew thrust his bayonet into the chest of his opponent, an Austrian Jew. As the latter, dying, breathed his last, he recited the Jewish prayer that begins with, "Hear, O Israel." The Russian, realizing that he had killed a fellow Jew, overcome with horror, collapsed on the battlefield. When he regained consciousness, he had become insane. When men realize that we are all brothers, that we are all members of the great human family, children of the same father and mother, children of God, when we see that even though oceans and continents separate us, even though we speak different languages, even though we differ by race, color, and belief, we are all brothers. Yet we are so closely bound in thought and motivation that our deepest and vital interests are identical. Again and again, despite all external differences, this invisible bond of unity that binds humanity into one great family has manifested, even on the battlefield. There, men who struck, shot, and wounded each other quickly became friends and learned to feel their brotherhood. It has happened many times that soldiers who were fierce enemies on the battlefield, who had tried to kill each other by all means, have discovered while convalescing side by side that they were truly united by sympathy and feeling, brothers at heart, but they did not know it. If these men had known and seen each other's soul before the battle, as they did later in the hospital, they would never have been incited to shoot or try to harm each other. Despite our failures, mistakes, and crimes, nations are coming closer and closer together. Scientific discoveries, marvelous investments, the widespread use of steam and electricity, the conquest of the air, all of these rapidly unite humanity's interests and bring distant countries of the world into close and intimate connection. The West and the East are no longer at the ends of the earth. They are beginning to know each other, to respect each other, and to learn from each other. They are beginning to realize, in the broadest sense of the term, the truth of Kipling's phrase, "But there is neither East nor West, nor boundary, nor race, nor birth, when two strong men stand face to face." Even if they come from the farthest reaches of the earth, scientists accumulate proof after proof of the unity, not only of humanity, but of the entire universe. The unity of all life shows that there is only one substance, one force or eternal essence in the universe, and that everything we see is but a variable expression of it. Everything around us is but a modification, a change of form of this universal substance, much like electricity is a manifestation of force in divine forms, in its power unleashed to fell great trees and destroy huge buildings, or in its use by humans to propel trains, light our homes, provide heat for cooking, and in many other domestic and industrial devices. The main lesson we must learn from all this is our inseparable union with the Creator of life, this eternal and perpetual unity of spirit, the unity with the Father that Christ came to teach us. I and the Father are one. I am the vine. You are the branches. We are so closely bound to each other and all to the Father, like branches to the mother vine. When we are aware of our union, of our participation in the infinite, we feel an additional power, just as the branch feels the force of the vital currents flowing to it from the vine separated from the mother trunk. The same branch would not feel as secure. It would soon realize that it could do nothing alone and would soon wither and die. At the moment we pluck a flower from its stem, it begins to wilt and fade, for it is separated from the source of its life, separated from the great chemical laboratory of nature, from the miraculous creative energy of the sun, soil, and atmosphere. It dies within hours. At the moment we separate from our divine source, we begin to wilt, to shrivel, and to die. As long as we remain separate, nothing can stop this fatal process of withering. When we do not feed from our source, we are like the branch cut off from the mother vine, like the plant torn from its mother stem. My experience has shown that people who, for various reasons, feel isolated from the connection with the divine source of things, suffer intensely from fear. They are imbued with a vague but dominant terror which grips them tighter because it is invisible and unknown. They vaguely feel that, like meteorites in the sky that have escaped the gravity that controls other celestial bodies, they are separate human atoms without any relation, without the security of being under a protective power, guidance, and support. They suffer from serious nervous disorders, often overwhelmed by a sense of total isolation, of being cut off from any supporting force, and they are terrified like a lost child who doesn't know where to go. Temporarily, and to a lesser extent, people are terrified in a thunderstorm and rush to the cellar or any place to hide from danger. They suffer from this feeling of separation and loneliness. All those influenced in this way would benefit greatly if they reflected on biblical passages such as, "In him we live, move, and exist. The Father is in me and I am in him." These are rigorously scientific truths. We could not live, move, or exist outside the power that created us, that supports us, and bears us. Being aware of this gives us a sense of security and protection that nothing else can provide. Our individual strength comes from our awareness of omnipotence, just as our national or corporate strength comes from our union with each other. Every human being is like a drop of water in the ocean. It is not independent and cannot act alone. Consciously or unconsciously, it is part of the masses around it, and is in contact with other drops of water from all sides. Its existence and success depend largely on its unity with others. Even if an ocean drop could separate from the mass and try to live its own life, it would soon cease to exist as a drop. A lone man cannot accomplish much. His success depends on his union with other men. His dignity and strength are enhanced by the organization or group to which he belongs, just as a cable is strengthened by the sum of the strength of its wires. Humboldt asserts that nature is unity in diversity of manifestation, a marvelous whole animated by the breath of life. When we become aware of the truth that we are an important part of this wonderful whole created by God and cooperate with it, we will come into possession of a power and dignity that will make our lives sublime. The greatest minds of all ages have drawn their strength from the invisible source of their vital connection with the power that creates and operates through each of us. They also believed in the great mission of the race. They believed in the divine plan that runs through the universe, working for justice and shaping the destiny of the race. This faith in the human movement toward God has even characterized those who did not openly profess religious faith. Their belief in the divinity of humanity has been a powerful factor in their character and the root of all their power. This same faith, this unwavering trust in the divine cosmic intelligence, has brought consolation, increased mental peace and happiness to crowds of human beings more than anything else. Indeed, it is the only thing that can bring us true peace and lasting happiness. There is something more than the brainpower needed for a man to be a true constructive force in the world, and that is his divine connection, his being in the current heading towards God. Without this essence, despite all that the mind and body can do for us, we feel a void within us, a great lack, a longing, a soul that yearns for something we do not know what it is. Without it, even if we have the most complete physical and mental equipment, we are like a new electric car ready for service, fully equipped in every detail, except for the carriage pole that connects to the power supply. Fullness, satisfaction, and divine energy can only come from harmonizing with something beyond the physical and mental plane. We must set aside our confusion and tap into the source of infinite power, or else we will be in a situation similar to that of a car not connected to the driving force, the only thing that gives it the power to move forward. We must tune into the divine current flowing towards God through contemplation, prayer, noble actions, selfless service, and sincere effort to live to the best of our abilities. We cannot establish a connection with divine power through any selfish cause. Any act of greed is alien to humanity, risking to separate us from that powerful current flowing towards truth, justice, and God, and seeking to find a substitute with our own weak forces. However, every time we knowingly do evil, every time we stray from the truth, every time we commit a dishonest and unworthy act, or do something petty and despicable, we separate ourselves from that current and weaken the omnipotent control over us. We break our connection and become prey to all kinds of fears and doubts. Someone rightly said that when a man commits an evil act, he binds himself to pain due to the unity of all life. He has established a connection between himself and the entire stream of corrupted human influences. He is connected to all the forces of the universe that will conspire to drag him further away from the creator and inspirer of all good. The reverse is equally true. If a man performs a good deed, engages in a noble work, all the creative and elevated forces will come to his aid. He will be strengthened by the added power of all others who work with the same spirit on the same plane. All good things vibrate at the same frequency. They belong to the same family. Similarly, all bad things vibrate in unison and are part of the same family. Draw one, and you will attract all the others, for they are on the same plane. A depressed and downcast state of mind, for example, connects to the entire depressed and downcast family, to the whole army of failure. And when we make this connection, our entire being adjusts to the dark and depressed vibration. If we harbor thoughts of poverty and fear of falling into destitution, we unite with all the poverty vibrations in the universe. Thus, everything related to poverty rushes toward us through the current we have established, according to the same principle. If someone has cheerful and optimistic thoughts, if they connect to the current of abundance, to the generosity of an abundant offering from the Creator, they ally with all the subtle, productive, and creative forces of existence. It used to be thought that we could only acquire knowledge or impressions through the five senses, but now we know that there are many other ways by which we communicate with others. There is a mental and spiritual communication that is more intimate, more real than anything we can do through physical contact or expression. We can sit next to those who sympathize with us for hours, without touching them, without saying a word, without even a glance, and yet enjoy the sweetest and most delightful conversation. We are aware that our minds communicate with each other in a deeper, subtler, and more satisfying way than is possible through physical contact or through the senses. Indeed, there are many moments in life that are so sacred that we feel that simple words would profane them, distress them, and disturb them rather than help or comfort them. We are aware that they are too coarse to convey the most subtle feelings, too clumsy to bear the expressions of sympathy and love from one soul to another, which are in harmony. The message of love teaches that the love of life is one heart beating through God, you, and me. One life flows in the veins of all creation. The mind fills with beauties that the physical eye never beholds. The mental ear hears harmonies, wonderful melodies that the auditory nerve is too rudimentary to perceive. The soul, through its closer connection with God, receives perceptions that even the mind cannot comprehend. Through this divine connection, through the great within ourselves, we can gather power that will revolutionize our lives here and now. Within ourselves, we can unleash streams of energy infinitely more powerful than any physical power. We know that the cosmic ether surrounding us is full of divine vibrations charged with spiritual force and omniscient intelligence, always waiting to flood our minds when we make the right connections and are ready to receive them. This universal substance, the cosmic ether, is the source of all provision, just as is that divine power which most people exclude from their lives because they do not know how to connect to it. They firmly close their minds to the divine influx, refusing to believe in what is not demonstrable by the senses. Most of us are highly skeptical about the reality of the invisible. We are like doubting Thomases, doubting only what is material, what we can see or hear. Children could be educated in a different atmosphere if they were introduced from the start to invisible realities and used them for their purposes, just as we shape and mold material things. There would be relatively few failures in life. It was intended for man to remain in perpetual contact with the power that created him, to remain in harmony with all that is wholesome, good, pure, and true. But unfortunately, we constantly lose our connection and thus become powerless, weak, when we could be powerful, strong, and creative. Living in wireless communication with the divine current, flowing through all creation, means being in contact with divinity. And indeed it is to be divinely successful. No external power can sever our communication with this current. Even the worst criminals, those who have been isolated from human society, can continue to be connected to their source if they choose. The Creator has not cut them off, has not rejected them. They have severed the connection themselves. The Creator will not strike them down, will not smite them with his wrath, not even the most profane of the unfortunate who ever lived. Even if he cursed him for creating him, the immense love of the Father would continue to sustain him, keep him alive, nourish him. It would allow the same splendid sun to shine upon him as upon the greatest saint. All the blessings of nature would continue to be there for his enjoyment and would be given to him as freely as to the most devoted worshipper. If we could understand this magnificent truth, our unity with the great creative principle of the universe would transform the race, banish fear, bring peace and harmony into our lives, give us a sense of security, satisfaction, and happiness like never before. Until we recognize our unity with God and with others, we will never reach our full stature. We will never tap into the manifold powers at our disposal. We will never attain that glorified manhood which aligns with the possible pattern of man created by the Father and Mother, until it is rooted in the nature of every child who has not only been created by the Father and Mother, but who is forever and fundamentally connected to him, closer to him than to their own hands and feet, closer than the beats of their heart. This unity of the child with its Creator is the principle that will ultimately shape the race into truly perfect beings.